everybody, welcome. It's Natha Perkins from Astrology. We are talking about the astrology of 2025, although this is less about the specifics of the transits of 2025 and much more about the energy as we move into 2025 and what to expect. If you like my style and you would like to book a private reading or join a mentorship or an apprenticeship for astrology, you can find me at electraastrology.com. And if you are listening on the podcast, make sure to subscribe so that these episodes get downloaded. And if you're on YouTube, make sure that you like and subscribe. That way you can keep finding me, and it also helps the algorithm. I have had a lot of people in readings and otherwise wanting to know my take on what we were moving into. And it is very tricky. It's tricky times to be really open and honest and specific, because there is so much diversity in what people are believing and thinking and how they are seeing the world. One thing that we watched with the elections is that many astrologers made predictions. And I don't make predictions. That's not my MO. I don't enjoy doing predictions because, frankly, I don't know if I'm right. I am not going to sit here and tell you that what I think and what I know to be true is true for you. And I think that's one thing that we have to really watch out for, as we are so indoctrinated right now with people, whether they're in a government agency or they are part of the media or they're some guru that you follow on Instagram or they're a religious leader, people that are trying to take what they believe to be true and trying to make it the capital T truth and trying to make it your truth. So as we have been looking at Neptune in the high degrees of Pisces, this is one thing that has become really evident are these false gurus, and we see them everywhere. It can be anything from a little fish influencer that's trying to get you to buy pancake mix, all the way to a big celebrity that is trying to influence how you vote. And then, of course, the marketing machines of selling us all of these brands and selling us anti-aging. Also, fear that the world is going to hell in a handbasket. You know, it is really confusing out there. And I think that's part of why people look to astrologers or psychics or tarot card readers or religious leaders, like whatever it is, people are looking for guidance. They're looking for answers. But one thing that I would really encourage you to do is to take any information that you get from anybody, myself included, and filter it through your own gut instinct, your own intuitive hit. Because here's the thing. We are moving into separate timelines where we are all in the same world. We're doing the same things. We're watching the same shows and shopping at the same grocery stores. And we are actually in separate timelines from a lot of the people around us. And that's a really hard concept to understand because it's really foreign. And we were not taught that concept in school. And it requires that our brains do these gymnastics to try to understand what that means. But a very simple way to look at it is you're sitting at Thanksgiving dinner with your family, and the people on your left all believe one thing, and the people on your right all believe another. And you might sit and say, how is it that we're in the same family, at the same table, living in the same country, and raised essentially in similar ways? How is it that we see the world so totally differently? How is it that some of us are looking at the world through the lens of fear and tragedy and aggression, outrage, judgment, and the others are looking at it through the lens of optimism and hope? And I want to say that this isn't that some people are all heavier energy and some people are all lighter energy. We're kind of moving in between those timelines. You might be the most enlightened, optimistic person on the planet, and you still get angry when somebody cuts you off in traffic. Or you might have a family member that you perceive to be really judgmental and angry, and you might have really sweet moments of heart connectedness with them, right? This isn't about anything being black, white, right, or wrong. This is about us really understanding that we have faced all of these choice points, especially over the last 5 years. We will continue to face those, but those choice points, they're like forks in the road, and we get to decide, where am I going to go with this? So, as I talked about in my election videos, great example of how we get to decide how we are going to interact with something that is clearly affecting a collective. And we get faced with those choices every day. It can be as simple as, how am I going to react when somebody in the shopping line ahead of me is going too slow? And I'm finding myself getting really irritated and angry with them. How am I going to react? How are you going to react when somebody has a different point of view than you, or when somebody is not cooperating? I mean, we are faced with these things all the time, and the difference now is that we have more consciousness available to us. There are enough people on the planet that have begun to do this inkling of waking up, yourself included, if you're listening to this, where you are becoming more self-aware. You are becoming less reactive to what is happening in the moment, and you are developing more impulse control. So you aren't immediately the victim of somebody else's BS. You aren't immediately thrown into a state of reactivity because you feel disrespected, right? All of these old ways of being, when we're talking about diverging into different timelines, this is one of the ways to look at it. Old timeline people and old timeline you, because you're still dancing back and forth between different lines. But the old version is where we are at the mercy of what is around us. We are at the mercy of the people, the beliefs, the customs, the culture, and we are powerless to change it. We are accepting that that is the way it is, and it will never be different. And there is nothing wrong with that, right? I want to reiterate, and I see this in the charts all the time. We all come down with a soul's desire to experience certain aspects of life. Although we would like to think that we would choose to come and experience beauty and reverence and awe and excitement and joy and creativity, it's not always like that, because we come with a desire to expand our souls, with a desire to grow. And frankly, I don't think that our soul version, our higher self version, is all that concerned with happiness. I think that it's concerned with growth and with evolution. So many of us do opt to come down and experience things that are difficult. Now, some of us are in a timeline, or in a lifeline, I should say, where that's how we're choosing to grow, through famine, for example, or through war, through a certain level of psychological or spiritual unconsciousness. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, you've probably had many of those lifetimes yourself. And then others come down and they say, I want to learn how to find more consciousness. I want to learn how to understand myself better. And when we look at this through the meta, if we are all a part of some higher power and we're little pieces, and we are source trying to understand itself through our human experience, it's really important, wouldn't you say, that we are trying to be self-reflective in some ways. Now, it's not going to be everybody. So again, it's this divergence in timeline, where there will be some people that will stay on the old timeline, where the world looks the same way that it's always looked, which is hard, difficult, reactive, angry, judgmental, scared of what's new, scared of what's different. And we will allow those people to be on that timeline, and we will accept that if we are on a different timeline, that our mission is to really work with the parts of ourselves that veer towards the heaviness, that veer towards being anxious and outraged and angry and jealous and judgmental, etc. So when we notice those pieces of us getting triggered, which, thank you, universe, thank you, astrological transits, thank you, other people on the planet, it's happening all the time. But our job, if we are desiring to go into the higher timeline, is to work with those heavier energies when they show up. And we have a lot of opportunity to do that in 2025. We've had a lot of opportunity already, but it up levels, it amps up. So, one of the things that you can do is you can really practice this self inquiry of trying to understand, why do I feel this way? Why am I having this experience? How did I react? How could I react differently? How does this make me feel? I'm asking you all of these questions that are essentially Aries all the way through Virgo questions. So Aries is the part of us that is trying to figure out what our boundaries are, trying to figure out what our passion is, what we feel really strongly about, and how to draw our line in the sand and have our boundaries about it. We're learning how to say no, and we're also learning how to say yes. And then we move into our Taurus energy. And this is where we are learning how to take responsibility for ourselves, for our actions, for the things that we want and desire. We're also learning a lot about self-confidence and what we truly value. Then we move into Gemini, and this is where we're working with our mind. And we are looking at how persuasive our mind is and how easily our perception of what's happening shifts and changes with the weather, with our sleep cycle, with the moon cycle, with the people that we've talked to, with the food that we've eaten that day. And then we move into Cancer, which is where we are addressing our emotions and the way that things make us feel and the things that make us feel emotionally insecure and how to soothe ourselves. And then we move into Leo, where we're seeing with fresh eyes, wow, this is who I am. This is what I want. This is what makes me excited and vibrant in my life. This is me as a sense of self, as somebody that has an ego structure. And we move into Virgo, which is where we begin to look at others and want their approval. We begin to develop this inherent sense of right and wrong. And we really start to develop our own values and our own morals. And we learn how to serve, how to give of ourselves to better humanity. So I want to stop there and just say that when you're working with this higher timeline, which is available, those are the places to begin. That is the self-inquiry. That is where you are turning every situation and every relationship back at yourself, using it as a mirror to see yourself. Why does this bother me? What is happening in my physical body? What is my response to this? Am I responding in a way that's going to get me the outcome that I want? Am I being a baby? Am I being grumpy? And is my jealousy getting in the way of my happiness? Right? So we start to look at some of the ways that we are interacting with and responding to the world, because that is us helping Source to know itself better as we come to be curious about who we are and what we are doing. And if you haven't listened to my episodes where I go through all of these archetypes pretty thoroughly through this lens of self-awareness and seeing yourself more clearly, I suggest you go back and listen to them because they really lay it out. This is the nutshell version. But you see, this is tricky work for all of us because it means that we have to break down our conditioning. And it means that we have to start taking the self-responsibility for where we're at and what we believe. And if you are locked into perspectives of anger, of resentment, of feeling like somebody owes you, or somebody said a mean thing to you 5 years ago, or somebody should have voted differently. I mean, this is lower timeline stuff. I hate to say it because we all get locked into it. And I think a lot of us would like to feel like we are on the awakening path and we're doing everything right. But the truth is that the universe conspires to give you all of these mirrors all the time that show you where you are veering off course. And when you're having those kinds of reactions, especially if those reactions are pointed at somebody else, I think it's somebody else's fault that I feel this way or that this thing happened to me. It's a failure to really see the richness of the situation and to really use it as an invitation to know yourself on a deeper level It's like when we push all of the responsibility for everything that we feel out onto other people or situations, we lose something. We misplace one of the keys to our development, and it's a misstep. So then, as we continue on this journey, and this is part of what is happening now that Pluto has moved into Aquarius, because Aquarius is about the collective, and we're moving into a time where we will begin to need our neighbors in a new way. We will need our collective. And so it's been interesting to watch how, I'll just call them the powers that be, have done such a pointed job of trying to turn all of us against one another. Women against men, white people against Black people, Christians against New Age, vaccinated against unvaccinated, Democrats against Republicans, the US against China, the US against Russia, like whatever. Anytime that you are falling for that narrative, that it's us against them, and you can take this into your personal life. It's me against my family member. It's my coworker against me. Anytime that you're slipping into that energy, again, it is a lower vibration. It's a lower timeline. It's an old timeline that actually isn't part of this newer, higher dimension that we're ideally wanting to get into, right? So as we're working with the collective, we have to start realizing how to deal with people, how to deal with one-on-one interactions, and even how to reframe our belief systems about big groups. And it is going to take a deconditioning. And that's part of what Pluto is going to do in Aquarius for the next 20 years. It's going to be showing us how important it is to be in community with one another instead of always looking at somebody that doesn't believe what you believe, somebody that has a different perspective as being against you. And the thing about all of this is it's really subtle. It's really easy to get coerced into these schools of thought. Now, I want to move into the higher parts of the zodiac here because this is where we start looking at how we relate to other people and how seductive it is to fall in line. So we go into Libra, which follows Virgo. And everything from Libra to Pisces talks about what's out there. Everything from Aries to Virgo, like I just talked about, is what's in here, what's in your heart, what's in your physical, personal experience. And so we move into Libra, and Libra is relationships. And you think about who you're in relationship with and how, in order to maintain what feels like ease in relationships, a lot of times we do end up changing the way we think, or we do end up going with the flow, or deciding, oh, I like that kind of music too, or I want to wear those kind of clothes too. And so this is where it begins. We start to conform in small ways, and we want to not start fights, and we don't want the drama. And we can also be very captivated by the people we're in relationship with, and we want to be more like them, and we want to have friends like them, etc. And then we move into Scorpio, and that's when we have our shadows, and we have our trauma, and we have all of the things that have happened to us in the past that have been really hard, and our identifications with those things. I don't want to get hurt again. I don't want to be controlled again. I don't really want to have to feel those deeper, harder feelings that this trauma instigated in me. And sometimes we deal with those feelings by drinking too much or using little addictive tendencies to numb and not have to feel. Sometimes we try to bypass those heavier feelings and experiences by being angry at the world, blaming. We try to go in and control the world and control the people around us. And it's much easier to deal with a problem when we can be angry at somebody, or when we can make it their fault, because then we don't actually have to do the work. So again, this is heavier timeline stuff. And the moving into the higher version of the timeline is being willing to look with honesty at where we've been, at where we've come from. And, maybe being able to love people without becoming exactly like them in the case of Libra. Maybe being able to ask for what we need while still maintaining harmonious relationship. And then we move into Sagittarius. And This one I think is hard for a lot of us because Sagittarius is a very fun and exciting energy. So we really relate to it and we want to be in it, but it's also where we think we know everything and it relates to our belief systems. So this is something that as we move into 2025 that we are continually challenged with is what do you believe and is it the truth? And not is it the truth because your teacher taught you, your religion taught you, your guru on Instagram taught you, but is it the truth because it is what you know in your heart to be true? And one of the things that I always look for with Sagittarius energy is that when you slip into trying to convince somebody that you're right, then you have slid into the lower timeline of Sag because Sagittarius is a guide and a seer and a seeker, but it is not an advisor. It does not tell you what you should do. As you're learning how to deal with the collective, we have to remember I have my own work to do. I have to really be careful that I'm not trying to push it onto everybody else because my belief systems are not going to be a perfect fit for everybody else. And then we move into Capricorn. And Capricorn, we've just come out of Pluto in Capricorn for 15 years. That was where we got the curtains pulled open on the government, on the traditions. And we are seeing how it is important to be in integrity, right? Have our own set of morals that we operate by, our own version of success. But it is not, again, about controlling other people. It is not putting other people underneath us so that we can scramble to the top. We're not using other people as ladders here, but instead we are in integrity. So then we move into Aquarius, and the Aquarius energy is the collective energy. So we're using the zodiac here, as I always do, as just an organizing set of archetypes for what we're all doing and working with collectively as humans. So when we hit Aquarius, and we've had so much Aquarius energy over the past few years, where this 0 degrees of Aquarius is where we have to go into a turning point. So bringing in this idea of timelines, the lower timelines are still going to be where you are dealing with the collective from places of, I don't like them, they're annoying, they're different, I don't want to go out and talk to them, they don't have anything to offer me. And then also I want to talk about this idea of conformity. So with Aquarius, sometimes we look at it through the lens of the conformist versus the rebel. And so as you're in 2025, this can be one of the questions that you're asking yourself. Am I being a conformist or am I being a rebel? And we find that conformity is easy and it's safe. And a lot of times we're just looking around and saying, well, what are they doing? I guess I'll do that. Does that look safe? Okay, I guess it's safe. But what we also know is that a lot of times a lower or older timeline is going to feel the safest because it's going to be what's familiar. But it's also not necessarily the place where there is the most evolution. So take a deep breath. Just see how you're feeling as you're getting this information. And again, I'm not trying to convince you that my way and my vision is the right way. This is all about you discerning, you taking what is right for you and leaving the rest. And that is so important in 2025, where you do become more self-reliant. You have to, because yes, we are moving into a time, an era where we are in community and we're working with other people. But the way to be in right community is by being so clear and so sure of who you are that you don't fall into needing power dynamics. You don't have to manipulate people. You don't have to make them think the same way that you think. You don't have to be totally irritated with them and trying to outperform them and look better than them and be more successful than them. That is a very distinct energetic change than where we've been. We've been in a strong competitive mode, and we have been in a strong, I have to scramble on top of other people to get to the top. my way or the highway. I'm more successful. I'm better and prettier than you are. I know more than you do. Now we're going to move into Pisces, and Pisces is where we are meeting our connection with God. And so, again, this is where the false gurus, the teachers, the people that you have listened to, anybody that comes from a perspective of, I'm right, I somehow have this connection to God that is stronger or more right than your connection to God. You got to watch out for that. And whether we're looking at a marketing campaign, which of course nobody would ever connect to being God, but certainly we give a lot of our faith to the advertisers. Oh, this will save me. This will make me feel better. This will make me thinner. This will make me wealthier. Looking at other people and saying they have what I have. You know, all of these are false stand-ins for our relationship with our higher power, our source connection, and our higher self. So as you are working with all of the human aspects of being human, then we come into Pisces, which is the spiritual aspect of being human, and how important it is to know yourself, to be able to see yourself clearly, to quiet yourself, and not be outsourcing all of your questions, your guidance, your rights, your wrongs. You don't want to be outsourcing those to other humans. You want to be outsourcing those either to your source connection, your version of God, or to your higher self, because that is the move into the higher timeline. And it's unknown. It's going to feel scary. It's going to feel confusing. And you will be tempted to go back into the comfort zone of the lower timelines. I'm angry. I'm resentful. I'm unclear. I'm anxious. I'm holding on to something. I'm holding grudges. My feelings are hurt. There's nothing wrong with any of those things. This is not some Pollyanna approach where it's like, don't be sad, always be happy, always be in a higher timeline. No, it's that when you notice that you have slipped down into the old drudge of, wow, here I am judging somebody. Here I am trying to control something. Here I am nail biting that something is going to go wrong, that under the illusion that something that I can do, some sort of meddling that I can do in the form of being good, gossiping, setting rules, making demands, dropping hints, all of these ways that we're always in there trying to control everything. As if somehow our control is going to change. So we are acknowledging when we've gone down into that and we're saying, oh, this is a mirror. What is it teaching me? Why am I feeling like this? How have I lost my connection to source? And I'm down here trying to do it all myself. And I'm being unsuccessful. And I'm falling back into somebody else is going to fix this for me. Lower timeline. And we're going to see this become more and more evident as we move through 2025. A lot of people will stay in lower timelines, period. They're not here to evolve in this way. You listening to this, I would imagine, have a desire to spend more time in higher timelines. And so it's all about the self-awareness, the connecting with self, the being in your body. I talk about these tools in all of my talks because ultimately this is what helps source to know itself better through you. And the more of us that know ourselves as well as possible, it creates that ripple effect. So there are more people that can begin this awakening process because we need people to be self-aware in order to solve a lot of the world's problems, because it is the lack of self-awareness. It is this service to wanting power, to wanting money, to wanting control, to wanting to dominate that causes so many of the problems in the world. We don't want to give our energy there. We want to give our energy to autonomy, serving of higher power, serving of other people, and most essentially, serving self. but in a sweet way, in a I'm serving myself because I know that it is serving God kind of way. All right, so take a deep breath into all of that. I hope this was helpful. We're in it together.